Well, Stormo, this has gone terribly to start the podcast. The intro hasn't started. But hey, what's happening, Rush Nation? It's your boy Stocks back for another week. If you are a keen listener right there, you will have noticed that I mentioned today's guest name. Before we jump into today's episode, if you aren't on Twitter or not following Murph, you'll have seen that he is, again, not with us because of health issues. He's struggling a little bit right now. So I know if you're a friend of his or on Twitter, you want to send him some love. I know he'd hugely appreciate that. And big man, if you are watching or listening, we miss you, dude. Get well soon. Our thoughts are with you right now. Okay, follow the podcast on Twitter at 5 Yard Rush. If you want to support the pod, head over to Patreon/5 Yard Rush. We've got some tiers over there if you would like to donate to the cause that is Rush Nation. I wanted to do something. So for me at the moment, the pod is a little bit limbo. I know Murph's got some big plans. Can't do that without him for obvious reasons. People come for Murph. They come for the stats. I can't do Murph. I'm not going to pretend to try and even do Murph. So I'm trying to come up with some stuff that's not off the cuff, but unusual, shall we say, for 5 Yard, stuff that other people isn't doing. And then I had this thought way back when I wasn't doing the pod anymore that I wanted to start a series, whether it be with 5 Yard or not, but at the moment it's going to be, obviously, because I'm back, where I talk to people that I knew from the industry, whether it be friends, family, guests we've had on, listeners, about how they got into football. And I wanted to do it from not just a generic, how did you get into football? Look, for us as Brits, it's a bit of an, I know people are listening, it's not unusual for them, but for other Brits who, NFL is still this closet thing where, oh, you're an NFL fan, you must be a bit of a weirdo. Like, that's not, if you're not an NFL fan, you're sort of closeted in a way like that. So I wanted to do a series of interviews and chats and stuff like that about why the people I have on got into football. And, we're going to get into that. And then there's going to be hopefully some ADP debate, but we'll see how we get on with that. So today's guest is a good friend of mine, a long-time 5 Yard fan, host of the Ballers Dynasty podcast, of which I am standing member. If you listen to that, you will know that I do the intro to that. But if you do listen to it, good on you, because it is just about our little league. There's nothing else fantasy relevant, and it's utter madness. I've referenced it a few times. So Storm is joining me. Storm, welcome to 5 Yard Rush. Welcome to the flagship. Don't be nervous. How are you, my man?
It's a big ask. This. Just super proud to be on the show, and as I said, nice words about Murph. So if you are listening, big man, I hope you are, slowly recovering. So all the best. Just happy and stoked, to be honest. Thanks for having me on. Really.
No, mate. Listen, I mentioned this to you when I came on the Ballers pod. I mentioned this to you, idea to you and Pitsy, and I know you through Pitsy, one of our writers and Fast Action Friday fella. I said that this was going to be an idea, and I thought, well, today I'm going to go for it. I'm going to start my potentially consistent segment on the podcast. Maybe I'll do some one-offs or whatever like that. And I thought, well, there's nobody better right now in this point in the season, because our rookie draft hasn't happened yet in Ballers. And as people may have guessed, Storm, you're not originally from England, so I wanted to get another take onto how you got into football and when you started getting into football, and did you, let's start with how you got into fantasy, NFL to start with, being from South Africa, right?
Yeah, so obviously lived in South Africa for majority of my young life, we'll call it. Ended up going to the States in 2001, and I went to Camp America and ended up working at a camp there. And obviously being a big rugby and actual football and cricket fan.
Whoa, actual football. You can't come on here saying.
It's hard to distinguish. I don't want to call it soccer on you, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you can. It's fine.
Soccer. So, and then going over there, working with loads of Aussies and Americans and Brazilians and everything. And back then, football, the English football, wasn't that big over there. Like, you could watch it, but I remember I went to watch a match and it took me an hour and a half on a bus just to watch a game in the Euros. So had to find something else to do, and started playing Madden, and then from that, followed a couple of players, and I remember my first early memory is Priest Holmes 2003 for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Cool.
A beast of a running back. And I'm pretty sure the Chiefs at the time, which is hard to say because I'm actually a Chargers fan now. But I'm pretty sure the Chiefs went like 10-0, or they were pretty 9-0, and Holmes was just running over everyone. And I was like, you know what, I like this guy. And then living in San Diego with the name Storm, I was like, how can I not support the Chargers? Well, LT was, finding his feet as well. And I think, but I've got to give it to Priest Holmes and the 2003 Kansas City Chiefs. And then I remember my first ever Super Bowl was the Bucs versus the Raiders that year. So
amazing. Was NFL when you were in South Africa? Was it NFL a thing? Did you know about it, or was it just not something you were interested when you were there?
No, I knew of it. I'm pretty sure my brother had like a Raiders jacket growing up. And we lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere, so I don't even know how we got it, to be honest. So obviously knew bits and bobs. I probably knew more about basketball because my other brother was a basketball fan.
Okay.
But it wasn't until I got to the States, San Diego specifically, that, found out more about football. But I took the long route because I went in the summer. Baseball was actually bigger, and as you know, football isn't on over there. So
yeah,
saw loads more baseball and stuff like that. But got there eventually, and I think Madden helped, and beating a couple of Americans, being a South African on Madden didn't go down well there. I thought it was great, running on 4 and 15 and kicking onside kicks off the kickoff, and just irritating them because you're not playing it properly.
yeah.
But that's how I fell into the NFL, should we say?
I think for us non-American, well, I don't know, maybe how old are you, Stormo, if you don't mind me asking?
Recently turned 40.
Okay, so we're from I'm 37, so we're the same sort of age, really. And I think for us, our generation, and I know I can't speak for everyone, obviously, but for those who gamed of our generation, had PlayStations and Xboxes, the originals series, we're talking way back when, Madden was one of those ways of getting into the sport for quite a lot of people from our generation. I think, it would be one of those things where you'd played FIFA. This was way before online gaming was a thing. It was, you got FIFA and you'd beaten the World Cup and you played your friends and you beat that. And then you liked sport. So you had to go at Madden or NHL or baseball, although baseball games have always been pretty shoddy. And people got into the NFL because they liked playing Madden. And then, I think Madden of our generation is almost the fantasy of today's generation. Fantasy football is now so accessible, and it's why people get into the NFL because they fell upon a fantasy league, and that's how I got into it. I played Madden back in the day, but wasn't a massive fan, and I had a baseball league. I just randomly joined an ESPN baseball league one year, won it, and thought, oh, this is fun. Obviously, baseball season finished, football season was upon us, and I thought, I'll have a go at this. Did one season of that randomly, and then found out through my wife's family that her cousin played, and that's how I met Murph, through her cousin, and it just all spiraled from there. So it was a random fantasy league that I had no idea about anybody in the entire NFL. It was just one of these things that popped up, and it just happened, and then all of a sudden, here I am.
Spirals out of control.
7 years later, talking to many people about fantasy football. It's madness, it is madness. When did you get into fantasy football then? From your journey into the NFL, how long was it till you started playing fantasy?
So obviously, when I was over there, didn't actually know much about fantasy football. Played the English Premier League one, and I was always like, oh man, this takes too long. The season's forever. It's too many midweek games. I never remember to do anything. And you'd play for like 2 months and then not play anymore. And then I remember Pitsy talking to me one year, I think it was 2013, saying, do you want to join this league? Do you want to join this league? I was like, no, Pitsy, I can't be bothered, man. I can't even keep up with the other one. I'm like, sucked in. So I didn't join that year. And then he convinced me the next year in 2013. And just from then, I would say from 2013. So there's quite a big gap from like my actual watching football to playing fantasy.
Yeah.
And then, just non-stop from there, really.
It's funny. It's our Ballers League. I'm going to reference that quite a bit, Rush Nation, because obviously Storm and I are in the league together. It's quite an active league on the chat. There's some people who are a lot more chatty than others, and there's some people who are in the league and they don't really chat and they go a bit missing in the off season. And I think unless you are in a hugely high paid money league where everybody is massively invested, there's always going to be some people who dip in and dip out at certain points of the season. But it is quite an active league, and I think that's fairly important for a league to thrive. You need some of these people in the league that constantly chat. So there's always stuff going on, isn't there, in our league in the off season? People are always putting stuff in about the NFL or just random chat, and it's important to have that in your league. And I think it also helps with other leagues that you're in. You know, some of the information I get from our ballers chat is applied to other leagues, and how many leagues do you play in? Have you got a lot of leagues, or is there only a few? Where do you sit on how many leagues you play in, Storm?
So as you're right with the ballers, there is loads, because there is quite a vast variety of who we support. You do get loads of bits and bobs that pop in, and they are quite helpful because I share stuff too. You know, my other Chargers chats and stuff like that. So I started off in my first year. I had on the NFL app. I had the one that obviously Pittsy invited me to, and I somehow randomly joined another one. So I had 2 leagues. The other one I had no clue because the team was drafted for me. So somehow I must have pushed like register and sign up, and I was like, oh, why have I got 2? And then the next year I joined another, and so on and so on and so on, until about 2-3 years ago I was in like 15 leagues, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't concentrate. There's redrafts and there's dynasty things quite new, and best balls. I was like, oh god, I don't even know what's going on. So 2 years ago I said I'm not joining anymore, although I have joined a couple here or there. I have like in my head said no more. So I'm currently in about 4 redrafts. I think I've got about 6 dynasties. I've got like 3 best ball dynasties. I'm in quite a few, or the charity ones, which are quite cool. And then, you know, I joined a vampire one that you guys put on a couple of years ago, which was cool. And I'm in another one. I think it's a franchise frenzy, which is quite cool. I'm quite enjoying that one.
Yeah, we do have some mad leagues. Yes. Did you have the COVID conundrum of joining way too many leagues because there was basically nothing else to do, and fantasy draft season was well in full effect at that point?
Yeah. So all I remember of COVID is NFL drafts, drinking rum at like 3:00 in the afternoon, and playing a lot of Call of Duty. That's all COVID reminds me of. So yeah, but I've tried to cut back, but I haven't joined any new ones this year. But we'll see. You know, the charity ones don't count. So if you get a few additional ones of those are okay.
Yeah, and the best ball ones don't count either, because once you've drafted for those, they're set and forget, aren't they? And yeah, it's interesting. There's definitely been a spike and a trough in everybody I know's leagues, where they had a couple of years ago they were in maybe 10 more than they're in now, and but I think people moaned about being in a lot of leagues, and I don't know whether you found this, Storm, but for me, it was almost spread betting at that point for me. You know, I joined all these leagues, and I'm not talking about spread betting to increase my win chance. I'm talking about I talked about this with Rob a couple of weeks ago, and how we talked about how his ranking sheet could help with your league specifically, because nowadays a lot of home leagues are weird with their points, and I say weird in a good way because it's not just a generic league. And I think it helped me being in so many leagues where I put all these feelers out into different leagues, and then I could selectively think, well, actually, I don't like that because there isn't enough chat, or there's a couple of trades gone on in that one which is just ridiculous and ruin the league. So at the end of the season, I'm not going to be the guy who quits halfway through. I'm going to be the guy who leaves at the end of the season, says thanks very much, but this isn't for me. And I went from having, well, I can't even remember how many leagues I was in at one point, down to, you know, I think I've got 4 or 5 dynasties now, and then I'll do a few best balls potentially and a couple of 5-yard ones, but maybe 1 or 2 redrafts. But I was really selective with what leagues I wanted to stay in. One, because I dipped out of the fantasy segment for a while. Obviously, I wasn't here anymore, and you know, 5-yard didn't see me, so I wanted to really be selective with the leagues that I was in, and I think it was good for me to whittle it down from a large number to what I wanted, as opposed to thinking, well, I enjoy all these leagues, but there's maybe a bit too much for me here. I'll have to drop one that I really like. So maybe it was lucky for some of those leagues that I had a load of leagues that I could drop that didn't matter. So none of my good leagues actually had to drop. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you find the ones you kind of want to keep, don't you? And the
Yeah.
ones that you pay more attention to. The only thing I find, especially having loads of leagues, whether they're redrafts or dynasties or stuff, you end up playing like, yes, Alan scored. Or like, oh no, he's against me in another league. And you're like, oh.
Yeah. I think there is, and also, I don't know whether you found this, Stormo, but when you get to a player you like, especially if all your drafts are at the same time, you end up with basically the same team throughout 7 leagues. And then, well, it'd be interesting. So my original home dynasty league, Stormo, is my team is. I made some really good early trades in the dynasty. My team's stacked. I've won it 3 out of the 5 years. Come in the semi-final with the other 2, and it's pretty similar to your team in our Ballers League, where your team's stacked. You score points for fun. Have you got any teams in any of your other leagues that are completely the other way around? So have you got a dynasty team that is just in full rebuild, or one that you just cannot get any wins with?
You're right. As I say, I think, especially when you do a lot of the drafts together, you do tend to, like, I've got Devontae Adams, and like I picked him up in like 3 redrafts. He's in 3 of my dynasties, and you're saying you just end up with the same team. I think my teams that I've got 2 leagues where I would say struggle slightly more than the others. And they're both leagues where I've actually inherited a team right after a draft. Because they said that they're not your team. You've just been given them. You've got to work up the field.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm 3 seasons in the one, and I'm still in the rebuilding phase. But yeah, I think with those 2, the other ones I kind of, just go off my gut and play how, with the players I kind of like. And I just say there is a similar feel to them, whether it's your running backs that are alike, or, your tight ends, or you've got a sort like a similar sort of feel with your wide receivers. But I think the 2 that I haven't actually drafted myself are the 2 I'm struggling to, rebuild and push on with.
That's quite a humble brag there, Stormo. Basically, everything you've done is fantastic, and the rest of the stuff is
average at best. Just the other 2 are just below that.
I don't know whether you listen to any dynasty shows, Stormo. Do you have any in your rotation? You can name other podcasts. We are not inclusive of 5 Yard Product here. Do you listen to anything dynasty specific?
I don't listen to anything dynasty specific, to be fair. Like most of my information I read. So big fan of all the articles and stuff that you guys do, and it's probably how I started with you guys, to be fair, with Pitsy and Rob and the boys, and yourself and Murph, and all the rest, Ryan, Rich and Lewis, and we can be here all day naming. But during lockdown, when I was on furlough, and I was driving for Waitrose, and that's when I really started listening to podcasts. And I was just
how far is Waitrose?
So in our area, we've only got 1 Waitrose, but like some of the drops, I could be out for 7 hours and only doing 7 drops. So,
you drove for Waitrose.
Yeah.
I thought you said you drove to Waitrose.
Really far away to go to Waitrose because I'm really posh. So posh, I can't afford to get the delivery. No, drove for Waitrose. Actually drove the vans and delivered people's food. And because I live in Wales, there's hardly any other Waitrose around, so I could be on the road for 7 hours and literally do 7 stops. And that's when I really got into listening to podcasts. And well, you name it, I went through a few. So some 5 Yards. I like the guy from the Undrafted, Alex, Guilty as Charged podcast. Around the NFL, a couple more Chargers ones, and pretty much anything that Pitsy would recommend, because he had quite a journey to work, so he would go through. So if he recommended any to me, I'll put those on.
We just talked about rebuild. I don't know whether there is enough done by the dynasty community on how to rebuild. I think rebuilding is really, really difficult, right? Because not only do you have to sell your players to get the draft picks, or trade for players that you think are going to increase in value, because that's essentially what dynasty is, right? You're buying and selling a commodity, and you're hoping that these commodities get you a win and doing so, you're increasing in their asset value. So you're getting these, you're trading off players to get picks. It's really difficult to then get the picks right. You know, how many people actually hit on the players they sell off? And it would be interesting to me, and Rush Nation, talk to me if I'm wrong here, but I think there could be a lot more done by the Dynasty community about how to rebuild and what makes a rebuild effective. Because I've been essentially rebuilding our team in the Ballers now for 3 years. You know, I took over the championship second place team, which was really good, and I basically blew it up as soon as I turned up. And
didn't read the rules or the scoring.
well, that's for another day. Let's not get into the scoring there, but it can be, you know, and I like to think this isn't me saying I'm a professional here at all, but I have a fairly good understanding, I think, of rookie value and player value before the drop off. And I sold some players and I got some picks, and I think I've picked 6 times in the first round in the last 2 years, and I got 1 or 2 next year. But my team it's very close to being good, but that's the whole point about a rebuild. Getting over that line from being very close to being I think is, if you can, the whole thing about Dynasty for me is drafting a team to win it at the beginning, because if you don't win it at the beginning, the likelihood of winning in it a few years or rebuilding and then winning it is far, far less than winning it in the first 2 or 3 years, I think.
I've spoken to a few people about this, you know, because some people will draft for the future, and some people will draft for win it now. And I want to win it now, and if I get the ring behind me or the ring on my finger, worry about that later. But you're right. I think you might have sold a business idea here or sold a good idea to someone, because there isn't a lot. You know, there's even people that are semi aware of what's going on in the NFL or fantasy. The rebuild's not easy.
No.
You're either selling, trying to buy a player, giving away your future, or vice versa. And people's, you know, trades are on different levels, and people value people at different levels.
Yeah.
So it's not easy.
And I guess that's what makes the rebuild, talking about a rebuild, really, really hard, because no league's value on players are the same. Even if you had the same scoring format for each league, 10 people in one league and 10 people in another value all those players differently. And unless everybody is reading exactly the same rankings or exactly the same spreadsheets, then values are going to be, you know, you look at trade, you just Google trade calculator. And this is not a way to go about your Dynasty trades, because everything is league specific. But if you Google trade calculator and put the same trade into the top 3 trade calculators, they're all different. So these people, these trade calculators, you know, they come to us for professional advice. They're all different. So how is Joe Public supposed to get anything right? You know, it's
one calculator says that's a great trade. The other one says you're miles off, and the one says, oh yeah, it's in the middle, fair. Like, well, which way am I?
my analogy for trade calculators is now the weatherman. If you watch enough weather stations, everything will be happening in your area, so you'll be getting everything. So no one's actually wrong. So that's my trade calculators.
I think they're a good guide, but because they vary so much, they are very, very challenging.
Yeah,
especially if you're trying to trade with someone that's challenging as it is. That just doesn't help.
Yeah, and what you also need from that trade calculator is to then take into consideration what your league scoring is, right? You know, you can't just Chubb and I'm in a league with Tom from old 5 Yard College, and he's won it once, I think, and he's definitely come close last year, and he needs a quarterback. He's desperate for quarterback in a Superflex league, and I need a running back more than I need a running back in Ballers. And if you know Ballers, then you know that running backs are like gold dust in there. So I threw out a trade: Nick Chubb for Aaron Rodgers. You know, Nick Chubb's got a couple of years left, probably. Aaron Rodgers might have 2, might have 3 years at the Jets, might have 1. But Tom's won it once, is definitely in a win now mode. And he couldn't quite pull the trigger on that because running backs are scarce, because you have to start 3. And I fully understand that. But in some other leagues, somebody would just say, well, that's a ridiculous trade. I'm not doing that, because, you know, the Superflex value on Aaron Rodgers, people Aaron Rodgers could be, he had 2 MVP seasons 3 years ago, and the guy's got weapons again. You know, Garrett Wilson could be Devontae Adams. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, Aaron Rodgers is a superstar. We don't know what's going to happen. We can't predict the future. It's just, but that league, and that trade in another league where I'm getting to with this, could easily have gone down. And it is who you're trading with. You know, it varies hugely. So I'm not surprised, actually, there isn't a lot on rebuild, because it's very difficult to do.
Yeah. Definitely. And it's a very sticky hole to be in if you are at the bottom trying to get out. Because sometimes there just isn't a lot around, and not people don't want to give up their gold running backs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and it's a continuous battle, isn't it? Trying to climb out of this everlasting hole you seem to be in sometimes.
yeah. And I think what doesn't help in some trades that I've tried to do recently is people get, they can't really see far enough. They don't see far enough into the future because of what they've got. Like you say, they've got this golden guy and they don't want to trade him away. But I was in the position, and Ballers, and reference it again, Rush Nation, apology, but I had to trade with Stormo because the way the draft picks fell, my team is absolutely terrible, but I didn't get the 101. I then tried to trade for the 101. The guy wanted 3 first rounders, and I was not prepared to give that up. Storm had done a trade with the guy who finished in second last, and Storm's already good team had the 102. And I had to then offer Stormo a trade for the 102 because I am running back needy, and I had to give Stormo, who already has the best team in the league, 2 first round picks to move up to the 102. And I think, where did I move from, Storm? I gave you 1-6 and 1-8, didn't I? Or something like, or
1-6 and 110.
And for you, you've already got a really good team, so the likelihood of you finding someone, or maybe this year Jameer Gibbs might have got into your rotation, but for you it was a good trade because you got future assets. You got 2 first round picks in a team that's already good, and I got the 102. Whereas in other leagues, people were like, "Well, I'm not going to give up the 102. I'm just not going to give it up." But you're blinding yourself by not looking forward, because if you could say that, I don't know, let's say last year who went at the end of the first, you get yourself a Garrett Wilson and a Drake London. I mean, that could have happened in some leagues. You're golden, right? It's just
smart.
Exactly. But people can't see, I can't give you 3 first round picks for the 101. It's just, that's way beyond value. I'm not going to, because you could say, well, those 3, one of them was the 103. So I could be, last year, I could have given up Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Drake London, or something like that for the 101. And you're just not going to do that for a running back that's got 5 years. Well, I would never do that. And Stormo, we got way off topic there. Let's talk favourite formats. What do you like to play in? Like, do you have a preferred format?
I like a few things. Like, I know this is really, really weird, but I really like doing a redraft on NFL. I've had some major issues, but I like the way the draft works on the NFL app. The rest of it's crap, but the actual draft on the app I really love that bit. But yeah, so I'd go sleeper and probably dynasty, but I like, I say I'm really enjoying this franchise frenzy I'm in at the minute. For those of you that don't know what that is, so it's 12 of you in the league. You go through, and each NFL team has 2 shares. You draft a share till you've got 5 shares in it. 5 shares. You can draft both shares in that team, and then you can only draft players from your teams that you own shares in. So I'm busy drafting one of those now. But I'd say dynasty probably just pips redrafts for me. But I like the fancy, like, little, I'd say PPR, probably PPR dynasty. I'll go. It's my favorite format.
Somebody in the comments has put, Rich once upon a time spoke about retooling as well as rebuilding, rather than going for picks, using the picks to get better vet players. And that is I'll put that on the screen because it's a great point. Facebook user, I don't know who you are, but congratulations, you're on the screen. That is a superb way of looking at it. Rich, one of the best guys in the business for me. He's so straight up, and it's Pitsy. Hey, bud. It is a great, but with like Storm and I just talked about, you can retool, but you've got to hope that somebody values the picks for those veteran players. It is massively, massively dependent on the league you are drafting in. And I think that's where Murph and I really honed in. We wanted people who were not in leagues with people that were active to come into a 5-yard league, to get into these leagues where people are active so that the value is there. You know, everybody can sort of have a value around the same range and then stuff can get done. Whereas if you were in a league, I was in a random, it's not random, I know the guy who ran it, but with a load of other people. And he really wanted Jamar Chase. He's a Bengals fan. And he gave away Dalvin Cook, Devontae Adams, this is in redraft, and another first or second rounder or a third rounder. I can't remember who it was now, just for Jamar Chase before the season, straight away after the draft had done. And the guy's gone from having Jamar Chase to having 3 top quality players basically, and that was it. League was over. The guy won it. I think he lost 2 games all year, and that's how you kill a league. You know, when people aren't really appreciative of value or don't really care. You get somebody who drafts and doesn't turn up, doesn't set a lineup. That murders it for me. So
someone trading in a redraft is phenomenally hard. It's probably the hardest part of any fantasy because you just can't. You've got no bartering chips with your picks and stuff like that. So you're very position dependent on you. So if you do pull one off, I think that's why a good one for that is, especially like with the NFL app, you have to put like a thing so the group can go through it. Whereas I think every draft I'm in on Sleeper or any, they go through straight away. But yeah, I've seen crazy things like that. People giving away like Keyshawn Johnson, who's injured, plus David Mills, and getting a fit Kirk Cousins, just because they need a quarterback. And I think that's where you get to veto the trades, just because you don't let any of that silly stuff through.
Yeah, I think that's the try, and I think we struggle with that in Dynasty because Dynasty is season long, and trades can happen. Well, not in our league; they can't happen after a certain point, which sucks. But I think in Dynasty, trades just go through because people are happy for stuff to happen all year. So rather than people who switch Sleeper off in the off season, waiting for them to veto on something, it just goes through and people don't change it. Whereas, and for me, unless you're in an active redraft league, do you not think this is true? Redraft is essentially best ball because trades don't. All right, you got the waivers. Don't get me wrong, but trades don't happen. So you're just doing best ball, but setting your lineup. So it isn't even best ball. It's like you set a best ball league that you hope is best while doing some waivers, but there's no trades.
Fingers crossed you put the best team out.
Exactly. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Do you think, Stormo, since playing fantasy football, you've been able to keep up with the trends and, you know, stay on board with new not fads, because Superflex is here to stay. Tight end premium is probably going to be the next thing that is constant. And once Travis Kelce goes, then tight ends are tight ends. So they're going to have to be increased in value.
That'll make it fun.
Yeah, and it will be a crapshoot. But do you think you've managed to stay water with fantasy as it's evolved over the last few years?
You know, when I remember my first ever draft, when I was talking about back to 2013, whatever that was, and it was a redraft at the time. And, you know, there's always like a strict strategy. You go running back, wide receiver, whatever. I had done no research. I still knew a couple of players from when I started watching and obviously playing on Madden. And I had pick 108. First player I picked, Peyton Manning, straight up. QB, and then I was like, yes, I was so happy. I was like, yes, I got my player. No one else picked a QB in the whole first round. I'm like, oh God, why am I the only one who got a QB? And I ended up with, I can't even remember who my running backs were at the time, but like, I think I drafted Josh Gordon, who was just coming into a suspension for doing all that stuff. So I struggled that year a little bit, and obviously getting to the grips with how it all works. But then from then, did a bit more research on how things should go down. And I've tried to keep up with, like, you know, you have a strategy, you have a plan. You can have it days before, hours before, you know what you're doing. Draft comes, oh, Kelsey's available, taking him. Whole plan's out the window. So yeah, I think I've learned over the years of, you know, what I like to do, kind of thing, and kind of which way, depending on how the draft falls to you. But there is, you know, one bit of glitter in my eye. I see a Devontae Adams there, and, you know, oh, got this thing for Adams, even though he's not got Rodgers thrown to him, and I've clicked the button and he's in my team. But I like to think that going into it, I feel prepared. And, you know, I have changed the way I've done things over the years. But how it all pans out on the night, who knows?
Yeah, no, I feel you. If it makes you feel any better, Stormo, I drafted Jameis Winston in his rookie season with my first round pick.
Nice.
And
Nice.
needless to say, I think I may have won 3 games that entire season, but it has made me feel a little bit better. One of the question from later on, Storm, I want to get to it now in case we do miss it. Nuke Hopkins, obviously, I've not seen anything today regarding where he's going to land. You are a big Nuke fan. Where do you think is the best spot for him to land? I mean, from all things I've seen and heard, it's basically the Chargers, the Chiefs and the Bills are going to be probably the 2 landing spots for Nuke. I don't know if you've heard anything else, Stormo.
Yeah, so all the talk around the town currently is, I've just read something yesterday maybe about the Bills can't afford him.
This is the NFL, Stormo. Like you just hand out bonuses elsewhere, and
they'll make a plan. My biggest thing, obviously, I love D Hop. As long as he goes to a team that has a QB that can pass. So if he ends up in Chicago, I'll cry. Or if he ends up at the Ravens, I'll cry. Somewhere where they're just going to run the ball and no one's going to see him. So Chiefs would be ideal because I've got shares in Kelsey and obviously D Hop. So either way, one's getting double teamed, the other one's open, vice versa. But anyway, like I know he listed a list of 5 QBs he'd like to play for. If he went to any of those, I'd be well happy.
Yeah, I think he's in the enviable position where he's towards the end of his career. So I think if he didn't play again, it wouldn't be the end of the world for him. Like I think he's probably set up enough now that he could retire. One of the things I saw he said is he wanted to play for a team that is in contention. I just don't understand how you don't just go to the Chiefs. How do you not just go to play with Patrick Mahomes?
Exactly.
And Andy Reid? It can't be money driven for him. Surely at this point, the ring is way more important for him.
Definitely.
He's one of the greatest receivers of the last 5 years for us to go out and watch. And I just think you go to the Chiefs and you are straight up the alpha wide receiver. Can't say receiver because Kelsey is still there. My only worry is that short to medium yardage that sometimes Nuke got. Kelsey just gobbles that up the middle. And you are right with the double coverage being flipped and stuff, but could we see just, cover 2 drop backs and 3 safeties dropping back into the middle and a package? I don't know, but why the Bills? Why would you go to the Bills with the uncertainty of playoff woes and Stephon Diggs being there? And I just think the Chiefs just lock and load it, man.
Chiefs would definitely be number 1. If you look at the Chiefs since Hill left, they've had no prime time wide receivers. They
don't need it. The trouble is they don't need it.
They don't, and you're right. D Hop would go in there and he'd be number 1 wide receiver, and him and Kelsey would terrorize. He's got hands like glue, catches the ball anywhere. And if personally me, you drop your asking price and you just go and play 1 final year and you go for the ring. And I think that's the smart move personally. But depends who comes and gets him.
You said you'd cry if he goes to the Ravens, and whilst that wouldn't be great, I think we see a Lamar this year that we've yet to see. I think he's new offensive coordinator. I think he's probably been working on his throwing. He's got nothing in the rearview mirror now. He's got no worries whatsoever. And I think we could see a Lamar that's unleashed from anything we've seen Lamar throwing-wise this season. And I think if I was to put my money on a quarterback having an MVP season and a season way above what we expect, it's going to be Lamar because he's still going to run. That's the thing.
Lamar's that's his additional weapon, isn't it?
Exactly. You can bank on him having 10 carries a game, scoring with his legs. It's the throwing. If they do throw an extra 12 to 13 times a game, then but that's the thing. You look at some of Lamar's advanced metrics and stuff, and his downfield accuracy, his length of pass, his air yards.
He's got a bomb on him when he throws it.
Lamar can pass the football. He just hasn't been asked to.
Yeah.
And I think now he's gone still.
If you look at his MVP season, he got over 4,000 yards. So he did some passing. But just since then, you've got Bateman. I know Bateman's been injured, and you had Moore, and you had Marquise Brown, and none of them got the ball. So just because you're like, bit of pressure, I'm going to run. And boy, can he run like nothing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
But if he can, with this new OC, he can start throwing, then he's got the weapons on that Ravens team are deadly, the wide receivers, if they get the ball.
Yeah. And if Nuke goes there, then that just opens up so many more avenues for Lamar to pass, but also to run, because Nuke will have to be covered elsewhere down the field. And, if there's a gap opening up in the secondary, you bet your bottom dollar Lamar can hit that as well as anybody else in the in the running game. So, yeah, sneaky. I think he could get a 1,250 and 4,000 yard season if everything goes right for Lamar, and that is big time in fantasy, big time in the NFL. It's just, yeah, I think watch out for Lamar this year. I'm not preaching that some random unknown is going to be fantastic. We all know who Lamar Jackson is. I just think he could have a better season than Lamar has had in recent years. I think we may be sleeping on Lamar a little bit. We were going to do some ADP stuff, Stormo. Let's talk some Chargers before we get into maybe a little bit of ADP, because this has been quite a casual, nice chat, and I would hate to ruin it with severe fantasy talk. Not that there's a fantasy, but I'm joking, obviously. But I do want to get your thoughts on the Chargers. As a fan, you obviously are plugged into some Chargers stuff that the generic NFL or fantasy fan won't be, because why would you? Like myself, why would I be in a group chat with some Chargers fans? And so let's start with the draft for you. Obviously, Austin Eckler reduced his deal, is staying a Charger. Great news for the Chargers, one of the best running backs in football. Obviously, quite happy to stay in Los Angeles to be a Charger this year. Great news for the Chargers there. And then with the draft, getting the wide receiver in the first round. Have you heard anything regarding the 3 wide receivers, how they might line up? Anything like that?
I've seen some snippets of the new boy, Quentin Johnson, and man, he looks good.
Yep.
He's made some pretty fantastic catches. And we all know Big Mike can catch as well, and Allen's one of the best route runners in the game. So I'm guessing Williams and Johnson will be on the outside, and Allen will be your slot receiver. I think he's overtaken Josh Palmer, who was just coming to his own last season for the Chargers. But yeah, how they're officially going to line up, they're still not about this. They're keeping their cards quite close to the chest because of the new OC Kellen Moore. So they're not giving a lot away in any of the the things I follow and stuff like that. And I think our biggest thing is just keep players healthy.
Yep.
And then once we can do that, we've all seen what Herbert can do. I think Lombardi obviously probably pushed him down a little bit, kept him under the thumb, and didn't actually release his full potential, which I think Kellen Moore will. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the new OC does. And Herbert's obviously come off. He's had some shoulder surgery, so he's recovering from that. He's throwing the ball, so it's sure he'll be good to go. And then yeah, we'll see. And then we just need to stop the run. Try to stop the run. Will be a good football team. Other than that,
there's always something where football teams could do something to make them a better football team. Stormo, yeah. I wouldn't worry with that. Facebook user says, hope I got a mention. Winky face emoji. This chat on StreamYard is terrible, because if you are watching on Facebook, I have absolutely no idea who you are. So this could be a load of people, could be the same person. Who knows? Welcome to the stream if you're here anyway. I think with the Quentin Johnson ad and keeping Williams and Allen, that's a good way of keeping Williams healthy throughout the season, because he's not been the healthiest of wide receivers for you. And the ability now to have 3 top dogs who can go out there, switch, mix it up, take reps off, I think that's a big thing for Williams and Allen, because Allen's, no spring chicken now, getting on. And it also means he's not thrown straight in the deep end, Johnson. He doesn't have to go out there and play 75% of the offensive snaps and be the dog straight away that he was in college. I think, yeah, I mean, I hope the Chargers aren't as good as you hope they are.
Obviously, for divisional reasons.
I'm not entirely hopeful for this season, let's put it that way, from a Broncos standpoint right now. Although Javonte is back training, which is great to see, I'm still not sure whether he's going to be ready week 1. Having that extra lateral tear in his knees. ACLs on their own are difficult to come back quickly from, and then getting that LCL or MCL, I can't remember which one it was, or maybe it was a meniscus, but not straightforward as Breece Hall. We've seen Breece Hall back in training looking electric already, and I'm not sure Javonte. And I mean, if you want a quick early win, go get yourself some Samaje Perine later on in the draft. I'm not sure on his ADP. We could look that up, but yeah, he's going to have first few weeks. Even if Javonte isn't the dog, we've seen Sean Payton with 2 running backs. When can you go back to a Saints team with Sean Payton that had that one running back? Yes, Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram shared snaps. Kamara was great, but he wasn't the bell cow. So are we even going to see Javonte Williams be a bell cow? It would be almost silly for Denver to do that when Samaje Perine has been brought in for a reason. Why waste talent, potential injury on Javonte? Just spread the ball about. We know the receivers, they've got the receivers. It's just, is Russell Wilson going to be any good? I don't know. Question marks on the defense as well.
It's looking leaner though, Wilson is. It's like he's stopped eating pies or something.
Yeah, he is looking leaner. I'll give him that. He is looking leaner. And maybe that's what Sean Payton wants. Maybe he wants a bit more of the Russ ground game that could open some stuff up. But
you're getting Perine in the hundreds, so
okay. Well, there you go. You take your late picks and you make your choices. Fair enough. You talk some ADP. Let's talk some ADP then, Stormo.
Go on.
I don't know if you've done any prep for this. If not, you're in a whole world of trouble. So let's go. Do you? I know you said earlier that you don't necessarily have a preferred draft strategy, but is there something you go in with more often than not into your drafts, or is it all based on where you're drafting from, and then we'll see what happens? I
try to load up early on, depending what falls to you, running back or wide receiver. But it does massive. Your draft position can play a part. I love being on the turn, especially the back, not the front. I love having those 2 picks in a row, just to make your own life easier because you can take one of each.
What a soft answer.
Yeah, but then you don't have to worry about if I take this guy now or skip him now, it's someone else. Yeah. But no, I would try and, as I think most people do, you try and go running back heavy at the start. And I know that, like the talk of the town, if you look at the ADP this year, there's the wide receivers are stacking up, aren't they, in the top 10 at the minute?
Yeah.
And I think Jefferson's still currently at number 1 in some leagues, in the PPR league.
Yeah, so I'm currently looking at 4 for 4, which I think is PPR. Yeah, Justin Jefferson's still 101. Interestingly, Christian McCaffrey is 102. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty set fair now between 10 and 12 teams. The first 9 picks are all the same.
The last time that I can remember off the top of my head that a wide receiver was number 1 was when Brown came in at number 1 a couple of years, when he had that B season for the Steelers.
Yeah.
Before, obviously, everything happened to the poor lad. But yeah, it's weird. But yeah, I'd say me personally, I would try and get a couple of running backs, but then say you get the Kelsey that falls on your lap in the second round, and you're like, oh God, I didn't want a tight end. Yeah. But you're talking wide receiver 5 or 6 or whatever he is, really. So
yeah, I mean, you look at Travis Kelce's current ADP right now; he's going as 105 in a PPR league. We had Murph and I, one of my favorite episodes ever was the great tight end debate. And I said I wanted to take Travis Kelce in the first round. He said I was mad. And then a couple of seasons later, people are taking him in the top 5 pick. And yeah, it is absolutely crazy. Stormo, you talked about wanting to draft from the 110. I'm going to stick you at the 1-1 here in a PPR. Are you going to be taking Christian McCaffrey as the running back 1, or are you going to be taking a wide receiver?
McCaffrey's injuries worry me. So do Eckler, so do Barkley. Taylor's coming off a big injury. I'll probably stick with Jefferson, to be honest. I'll take a chance.
Okay.
My boy Kirk Chains and Jefferson, I'll take a chance.
Even with the addition of Jordan Addison.
Yeah. Well, they had Thielen. It's another. Whoa, going back to like the trading and stuff. It's very, very tricky trading for someone you're hoping is going to be good compared to someone who is good. And yeah, Addison, I think with Kirk will be fantastic, but Thielen was great. Thielen was not so much when Jefferson was there.
But then the thing with Thielen is he's still got red zone targets. He's still scored touchdowns. And I think he could still do that for Carolina. They're not going to expect him to go out there and run massive routes and stuff, but the Carolina team could be dangerous. And once they get up the end zone, I think Thielen's going to be a big time target.
Yeah. But yeah, if you look at it now, if Kirk comes off, because Kirk had a great season last year, and if Kirk has Jefferson and, say, for instance, Addison, I think, defenses are going to be slightly more worried because they've always had, Thielen shorter yards in the red zone, but they've not had the longer, more deeper threats as the both of them can be. So I think it will be. But yeah, no, I'll still stick with proven Jefferson at number one. Then I think.
If I'm at one
PPR,
PPR, with CMC's injury history, I feel a bit dirty taking a wide receiver at one, and I know I shouldn't.
It's hard.
It is, but if I'm going to be taking a wide receiver, I am taking a full season of Jamar Chase over a full season of Justin Jefferson.
Oh, interesting.
It's when we're drafting, I am very this is perhaps maybe flippant of me, but I like to think of when I draft a player, I am drafting that player based on total upside. I'm not concerned that Chase missed games last year. I'm basing it on both games, both teams, both players, playing a full 17 games. And of that, I want 17 games of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase over 17 games of Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins. It is a coin toss. And if I was drafting at 2 and I was still going wide receiver, I would not be unhappy with either. It's having the 101 and the preference. And my preference at 101 would be Jamar Chase, because I think if he can have, last year his average depth of target was down by 4 yards. I think that increases by 1.5 to 2 yards this year. I think a full season of Jamar Chase this year could be absolutely filthy. And I think his upside, with the addition of Jordan Addison for Justin Jefferson, I think Chase has a higher upside than Jefferson. Don't get me wrong, Jefferson, unbelievable wide receiver. But I just think Jamar Chase is a little bit better than Justin Jefferson. So if I'm drafting upside, I want that all day long. And
what do you say to a healthy Cup and a healthy Stafford then?
That's the thing as well. Points per game and stuff. Cooper Kupp was
catching 10 catches a game, wasn't he?
Yeah. And that's the thing, for me, it's not a Cooper Kupp's had some knocks previously, and does miss a game or two here. But if he's catching 10 balls a game and is baselining 140 to 160 points without any yards or touchdowns, it's hard to look past that. It is, where is Matt Stafford? That's the big. Yeah. I own Cooper Kupp in quite a lot of my dynasty leagues, and I am hugely worried. Although it hasn't really mattered whether it be Stafford or Goff, Cooper Kupp is unbelievable. I mean, is there a more underrated wide receiver still than Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, Matt. So where's he falling at? 6, did you say?
So he is currently 106.
That's a lot of, and you say Kelsey's at 5. That's, hey man, that's what, 1, 2, 3. That's a lot of receivers in the top 6, isn't it? It makes it hard. Just means there's some good running backs down the line, isn't there?
But that's the thing, and that's what makes this a really good year for wide receivers early in the first, because you go down to the second round, like end of the second round in a 12-teamer. We're talking Tony Pollard. I'm not entirely aboard that, but you've got Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs. That's 206, and then you get into 3s. Ken Walker, although that is way too rich for me right now, having seen what's gone on there with Najee Harris, Breece Hall, that scares me. Ramondre Stevenson at 309, when there isn't anybody else in the New England backfield. I mean, does anybody remember LeGarrette Blount for a few years ago? 16 touchdowns.
I love Blount. Stevenson's getting a lot of hype this season, so
yep.
I think he'll actually go higher in the end. But it depends on other people's draft strategies.
Yeah, I mean, we are talking about drafting now, and only degenerates draft now. I mean, it's madness. Let's get some. How long we got left, Stormer? What are we talking here? Maybe 10 or so minutes, so we don't go too long today. Let's quick fire these and get ourselves out. Thoughts on the Commanders this year? Do you think they're underrated or just a poor team? And is there anybody you think is going to be good value from them?
The Commanders, I think, whatever going on in the background is a shambles. Like, who owns them? I don't know what's going on. People doing dodgy things. Magic Johnson's in there somewhere. But they've got some players. They've definitely got some players. QB, they haven't got a quarterback, but all the rest, they've got some other little players dotted around there. But I was baffled why they didn't give Chase Young that 5th year. There's a lot of hype around.
I think he's broken. I think there's part of Chase Young that is not working.
You reckon he's not coming back fully?
No, he's not going to come back the Chase Young we saw coming out in the draft. I think something's wrong.
There's a lot of hype around Gibson and Catchin at the minute because obviously they've lost McKissick. Robinson came back. He looked, he could be decent. Come back from that serious gunshot injury. But Dotson and Scary Terry, 2 great wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Curtis Samuel as your 3rd. You just don't have a quarterback.
You watch Sam Howell. Sam Howell was legit at UNC. You watch Sam Howell. All he's got to do is be Sam Howell. He doesn't have to. He's got the weapons. Their defense is nasty.
Yeah.
Sam Howell just has to go out and be Sam Howell. Like don't go out there and be something you're not. Just go out and be Sam Howell. You'll be fine, and the Commanders will be good. Let's move to some Saints. Is there anybody on the Saints you particularly want this year? Olave in the 4 feels like decent value if Derek Carr's any good. Michael Thomas. If Michael Thomas is fit, but if Michael Thomas is happy with Derek Carr, like in the 8th round, that could
laughing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Thomas truther, and it doesn't matter when he gets drafted. I seem to really want him, and he lets me down every year. But
I've had him in my my injury squad for a couple of seasons. He's like, God save Thomas, come on, because he had that 2 really good seasons, and I'm pretty sure he was up there at getting drafted in the top 3 as well at one point.
Oh yeah, didn't he have something like stupid amount of catches one year,
and then just died? But they've given him this extra special years contract, so Thomas is there in the 8th. I'm taking him all day long. Whether he goes back on my injured reserve for the year, I'm not fussed, but I'll take a chance.
Yeah, this next bit of information, Storm, scares me. So the Bears running backs on 4 for 4. Khalil Herbert is currently the RB 37th going in the 9th round. That has to be wrong, right?
So I own Herbert in a league or 2, and when Montgomery went down for them last year, he was an absolute beast. Yep. But then when Montgomery come back, they didn't obviously, load share or anything. That Montgomery just took everything. But now, obviously, they brought in Foreman, Deontay Foreman, and we know what he did at Carolina. Just who wins that? Who wins that matchup, really?
And don't forget they drafted Roschon Johnson.
Yeah,
he's a good running back, but people kept saying, "Oh, well, what happens if he wasn't behind Bijan Robinson?" Well, if he was that good, he would have entered the transfer portal in college and joined a team like Jameer Gibbs did, went to Alabama and got drafted at 12. The Lions were happy to take him at 6, apparently, although that seems a little rich. That feels like crazy value. Khalil Herbert, for me, at 30, RB 37 in the 9th round. Surely he's good value in the 7th.
He could be their RB1. So to get him in the 7 to be,
he's gonna be their RB1 for me, and it's crazy.
The only thing is, you've got their actual RB1 is Fields, isn't it? So
that's true. Good point. All right, we talked about Monty. Let's go to the Lions. Gibbs or Monty? Monty's currently a round cheaper, going in the 5th, with Gibbs in the 4th. Is the 4th too rich for Gibbs? And are you just going to take the value of Monty in the 5th, or are you staying away?
I'm jet sweeping to Amon-Ra. That's what I'm doing. It's so hard because we know what Monty can do. We've seen what Gibbs is all about in college.
David Montgomery has never had a 30 point fantasy game. I don't think he's ever had over 100 yards in the NFL either.
And we know what Campbell's like as well. He'll stick with his bell cow, won't he? I think I'm taking a chance on Gibbs on that one.
Ooh, in the 4th is a little bit rich for me. Okay, Jacksonville backfield. Doug Pedersen's come out and said he basically doesn't want Etienne to carry the ball more than 20 times or even touch the ball 20 times a game. Is Tank Bigsby a steal as the 51st running back in the 12th round?
Any running back in the 12th round is a steal, I think.
Well, that could be a scrub. That's,
it's because Robinson, before they got Travis, obviously Travis had a season-ending injury, but then last year he showed his worth and he had some great games. But if they don't want him to carry as much, then you pick in. I'll take a chance. 12th round. I don't know too much about Tank. I like his name, but I've not actually watched any of his films, so I can't really comment. But as a 13th round, an RB2 for a decent running team, I'd take a chance.
So Travis Etienne is currently going at the first pick of the third round in a 12 team as a running back 10. Feels a little bit steep for what we've seen as an Eagles backfield with Doug Pedersen. There was definitely a timeshare going on there. Currently, 301 could fall away. Tony Pollard is going the pick before him. Najee Harris, Ramondre Stevenson. I want both of those over Travis Etienne right now. Dalvin Cook's going as in the fourth pick at the moment, but the Vikings have literally just come out and said they think Alexander Mattison could be a 3-down back. So Cook is still apparently a Viking, although hasn't passed the return medical or something right now. So that is all up in the air.
What is the big beef there? Is it the money? Because performance-wise, you can't see past him.
No, I think it's a combo of not being as healthy as perhaps they'd like, and maybe a money issue when Mattison for them is cheaper.
But will you get a full season out of Madison? Well, they haven't really got one out of Cook, to be fair. So
and they're not running it as much. The Vikings there definitely is a throw more game now. Okay, let's move on to Miami. One round currently separates all Miami running backs. Do you have a favorite of the three, or are you just taking the last of them right now for value?
I've always liked Mostert. Issue is he never has a full season, does he?
Nope.
But boy can run. Wilson's proved a decent backup when he comes in. And how do you say Devon's last name?
A-Chain.
A-Chain. Apparently he's got some wheels.
No, burner.
And for Mostert to say that, who's fast as, it'll be interesting. But it's also the unknown. But I think they're running a committee there.
I think there isn't a full season for Mostert. There isn't a full season for Wilson. Committee or no committee, you give A-Chain enough touches in a team that values speed apparently over. We go back. You remember John Gruden in the draft had the 40 times on a board. Well, McDaniel seems to be doing exactly the same thing in Miami, except it's working. And speed over everything, and it's working.
There's a lot of talk about his size, isn't it? But obviously, you can look at there's been loads of tiny running backs that have caused loads of damage. So
and he did everything. I think he carried for Texas A&M. I think he had over 30 carries, let alone not catches, just carries against Alabama last year, and didn't show any signs of wear in the fourth quarter.
Nice.
So to be able to do that against one of the best defenses in college football shows that he can do it. Whether he actually gets all those touches in Miami, I don't know, but he only needs a few plays to really cement himself as the explosive running back in Miami. And
I've just drafted him in a I've had a redraft, not a redraft. I've done a dynasty draft this week, and I've just drafted him at 106 or 7. It's because I needed it, and I took him over. What's the other guy's name? I can't pronounce. Charbonnet. Yeah. And I took out. I was one of the two, and I was like, oh.
So in the ballers, we've talked about this, but in ballers, I've got the 102 and the 103, and I'm taking Gibbs with the 102, and I'm in a real quandary as to what to do with the 104 because I don't really need a wide receiver, and I really wanted Charbonnet to land somewhere good. He didn't, and now I think I'm just going to go with the upside of A-Chain and hope that it works out at 103. And that's a ridiculously early pick, but I really need a running back. I'm not trading back because I need the running back.
And
I'm going for upside.
You're not going for Walker last in the full season and taking a chance on Charbonnet, then no.
I'd rather the upside. I just want the upside. It's all I've got. It's all I've got. Stormo, that concludes our ADP preferences right now. Thank you for being the first participant of the football stocks. I enjoyed it. I think it was enlightening. I don't know whether Rush Nation agrees, but it was fun. Mate, no, honestly, it was good to have you on. Do you have people let me rephrase that. Is there somewhere people can find you for generic football chat if you wish to be shouted out, or you can remain completely anonymous as just a face and voice?
I'm on Twitter at Mr Skyweather. You'll see me floating about all the 5 yard and other people's chats and stuff. And I just won a guide through Rich this week in a competition, which was quite cool. But I float about Mr Skyweather on Twitter. give us a follow you back. But yeah, we'll see you around. See you around the Russian.
Stormo, going to end it with a real life question. Is Storm your actual name?
Yeah, it is. So my parents got divorced when I was quite young, and both of them give me a different version of how I was named. Mum says I was. She read my name in a romance novel somewhere. Dad says it's from a like heavy metal band or a rock band. I'm like, yeah, Dad's version's better. But yeah, it is my actual name on the birth certificate.
So what we're going to take from that is Stormer's name from a Jilly Cooper book, Rush Nation. That is going to do it for this week. As always, don't forget, keep rushing.